In this video, I'll be going over all the basics of micronutrients for your nutrition. Like their name suggests, micronutrients come in relatively small quantities, but are so vital to so many different functions of the body. With the population consuming increasingly ultra-processed, super palatable foods that lack nutritional density, deficiencies in these key players of the body are becoming increasingly prevalent. According to the Harvard School of Public Health, more than half the global population consumes inadequate levels of several micronutrients essential to health. That's over 4.1 billion people. By the end of this video, you'll understand the most important micronutrients you should focus on eating, what they do and why they're important, micronutrients to pay extra close attention to if you're on certain diets like keto, carnivore, vegan, or vegetarian, foods you can find each micronutrient in, as well as habits you can follow to make sure you're getting enough of each micronutrient to optimize health. Without further ado, let's talk about the vitamins. First is vitamin A. It supports vision, skin, and immunity. Vitamin A comes in two forms: retinol, which is from animal sources, and beta-carotene, which is from plants and is then converted into vitamin A. A disease known as xerophthalmia, which on a very basic level is dry, cracked eyes, as well as blindness, can develop in pregnant women or young children with vitamin A deficiencies. You can get retinol from foods like liver, eggs, and dairy, and you can get beta-carotene from carrots, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, and spinach, just to name a few. If you're vegan or vegetarian, make sure to eat plenty of orange and green vegetables and pair them with healthy fats to boost beta-carotene absorption. Next, let's move on to vitamin C. Vitamin C is an antioxidant that helps with immunity, collagen production, and wound healing. It's water-soluble and highly bioavailable in fresh produce, but cooking can reduce its bioavailability. Deficiency risks include scurvy, fatigue, or bleeding gums. You can find it in foods like oranges, which it's famous for, strawberries, kiwis, bell peppers, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and a bunch of other fresh produce. In general, all diets get vitamin C very easily, but people on keto should prioritize low-carb sources like bell peppers and avoid over-relying on fruit because of its sugar content. Next, vitamin D. Vitamin D strengthens bones by aiding calcium absorption and boosts immunity. Your body can make all the vitamin D it needs from sunlight, but for most people, they aren't getting enough sun exposure to actually reach that vitamin D threshold. Low levels of vitamin D can cause weak bones or a low mood. You can find vitamin D in a select number of foods such as salmon, mackerel, egg yolks, and fortified dairy or plant milks. If you're vegan, you're probably going to need fortified foods or more sun exposure to get enough vitamin D. If you're keto, you can eat fatty fish. Next, let's move on to vitamin E. Vitamin E protects cells as an antioxidant, and it supports heart and skin health. It's fat-soluble, so eating it with fats improves absorption. Deficiencies is rare, but it can cause nerve damage. You can find it in nuts, seeds, and oils. Vitamin E is rich in a lot of fat-heavy foods, so people on keto will probably get enough vitamin E naturally, but vegans should ensure that they're getting some variety besides just almonds. Next, vitamin K. Vitamin K aids blood clotting and bone health. Vitamin K1 from plants is less bioavailable than vitamin K2, which comes from fermented foods or animal products. Low levels of vitamin K increase risk of bleeding and weak bones. You can get vitamin K1 from vegetables like kale, spinach, and collard greens, and you can get K2 from foods like natto, cheese, and eggs. If you're vegan, you might struggle with K2, so fermented veggies might be the trick. If you're keto, you might struggle with the opposite, getting enough K1, so you should eat some low-carb greens. Next, we move on to the B vitamins. The B vitamins we'll be focusing on this video are B1, also known as thiamine, vitamin B6, also known as pyridoxine, vitamin B9, also known as folate, and vitamin B12. Vitamin B1 fuels energy and nerves. It's mostly found in whole grains and, interestingly, pork, but when you refine a grain, it loses its B1 content. Deficiencies can cause fatigue. Vitamin B6 aids in brain function and red blood cells. Vitamin B6 is in many foods, such as bananas, chickpeas, potatoes, and poultry, and although deficiencies are rare, it could cause anemia. Vitamin B9 supports DNA and prevents birth defects. You can find vitamin B9 in plant-based foods like lentils, asparagus, and spinach, but it's also in fortified food like breakfast cereals. Finally, B12 is critical for nerve, DNA, and red blood cell health. Unfortunately, for vegan and vegetarian folks, it's almost exclusively in animal foods, so you're likely going to have to supplement. Deficiencies in vitamin B12 can cause anemia or nerve issues. You can find vitamin B12 in foods like beef, fish, eggs, dairy, or fortified cereals. Now that we've covered all the vitamins, let's move on to minerals. Calcium builds strong bones, teeth, and supports muscle and nerves. Of course, dairy is famous for its high calcium content. You can find calcium in lots of dairy products such as milk, yogurt, cheese, as well as plant sources like tofu and collards. Next, let's talk about iodine. Iodine primarily helps make thyroid hormones. However, it also helps with bone development, cognition, and metabolism. Iodine is a globally deficient nutrient. However, for most people, iodine deficiency is not a worry because, unless specifically labeled, most salt in the US is reinforced with iodine. Iodine is also found in fish and dairy. However, it could be in anything as long as the soil it was grown in had iodine in it. Now let's talk about iron. Iron carries oxygen in your blood. Heme iron from meats and animal products is more bioavailable than non-heme from plants. Deficiencies can cause anemia, fatigue, or pale skin. You can find heme iron in beef, poultry, and fish. And you can find non-heme iron, which is basically just elemental iron, in foods like lentils, spinach, and fortified cereals. Pairing iron with vitamin C can help absorption by reducing the iron in an oxidation reduction reaction. Next, magnesium. Magnesium supports over 300 processes like muscle function and heart health. It's bioavailable in nuts and greens, but refined foods lose it. Low levels can cause cramps or fatigues. Some notable foods with magnesium are almonds, cashews, pumpkin seeds, and dark chocolate with a high cacao percentage. Now let's talk about zinc. Zinc boosts immunity, healing, and taste and smell sense. I'm sure you're seeing this trend by now, but animal sources are more bioavailable, while plant sources are not as bioavailable. Deficiencies in zinc can weaken immunity. You can get zinc from oysters, beef, pumpkin seeds, and chickpeas, just to name a few. Now let's talk about potassium. Potassium regulates blood pressure, heart rhythm, and muscle function. It's widely bioavailable in fruits and vegetables, and low levels can cause cramps or weakness. Of course, you can find it in bananas, oranges, sweet potatoes, spinach, and beans, just to name a few. Now let's talk about selenium. Selenium is an antioxidant for thyroid and immune health. It's highly bioavailable in Brazil nuts and seafood. Deficiencies risk immune or thyroid issues. Brazil nuts are in fact so rich in selenium that you probably only need to eat 1 or 2 a day to get enough selenium. You can also find selenium in foods like tuna, eggs, and chicken. Now, to end it all off, let's talk about perhaps the most common mineral of them all, sodium. Sodium is an essential nutrient, and I'm not a certified dietitian, but I do not recommend stopping all consumption of it. Sodium is important for blood plasma regulation, pH stabilization in the body, and providing an electrical signal for nerve impulses. However, in today's society, it's unlikely that someone is sodium deficient. What's much more likely is an individual who consumes too much sodium, which can lead to increased blood pressure, which is no good. Even in the rare case that someone were to be sodium deficient, sodium is an abundant nutrient found in foods you're probably already eating, like bread, dairy, and seasoned meats and vegetables. For most people, simply seasoning your food with salt and eating things like cheese will ensure you aren't sodium deficient. And if you end up being sodium deficient, you can always just sprinkle a little extra salt on your food. Now that we've covered all the vitamins and minerals, let's talk about 5 tips to get the most out of them. Tip number 1 is to boost bioavailability. You should pair vitamin A and E, which are both fat soluble, with dietary fat. You should pair iron with vitamin C, and you should eat fresh or lightly cooked produce to preserve the nutrients. Tip number 2 is to eat the rainbow. Different foods tend to be associated with different micronutrients. So, if you eat foods of multiple different colors, you're ensuring that you're getting multiple micronutrients. Tip number 3 is to eat whole foods first. Of course, there is room for junk food, but you need to make sure that you're eating your whole foods first. This will ensure that you're not becoming micronutrient deficient. Tip number 4 is to have a diet-specific focus. If you're vegan, you're going to need to prioritize vitamin B12, iron, and calcium from fortified foods or supplements. If you're keto, you should probably focus on low-carb sources like greens for potassium and folate. Tip number 5 is to check in with yourself. If you have some kind of fatigue or weakness and it's reoccurring, it may be because of a micronutrient deficiency. It's a good idea to talk to your doctor and get your blood work done. That's it. That's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day, you guys.